Good morning, professors. My name is Ana Espinosa, and I'm here to talk about my action research proposal.
Reducing anxiety in oral presentations by scaffolding and using group work. Let's have a look to this image. Have you ever felt in this way? Well, as many people, I have. When I was at school, I used to feel apprehension, worry, dread, have difficulty concentrating, sweat, and have palpitations when facing a task. This is because we are afraid of not being good enough. I've divided this presentation into 5 main parts. First, in the introduction, I contextualize the school and the class. Second, the issue identification, where I present the identification of the problem, the sources of information and its results, and the guiding question. Third, I present the literature review that informs my action research proposal. Foreign language anxiety and its triggers, scaffolding, group work, and oral presentation. Fourth, in the action plan, I present the lesson sequence, a sample material, and the data collection instruments. Finally, in the closure, I present a brief reflection and the possible implementation in a real context. I'd like to start by contextualizing the school and the class. It is a private Catholic co-ed school, and every decision made is based on the Catholic principles. The school has full access to online resources. The class is an 11th grade that consists of 34 students of a B1 level of English, and it is a shy and well-behaved class. Now we'll move on to issue identification. For the identification of the problem, I observed some classes. I realized that the students are reluctant to speak in class, so there is a clear lack of participation. After this observation and some research, I concluded that it is due to foreign language anxiety, which is the main problem of this class. That brings us to sources of information. I used 3 sources of information. First, observation. As I mentioned before, I observed students' behavior in classes. Another source is conversations that I had with the teacher. She told me about the students' behavior. Although they understand, they are reluctant to speak in English. The last source of information is a Google form questionnaire that consists of 12 questions to know their interest. I'd like now to discuss the questionnaire results. 24 students answered this questionnaire. There are 4 questions important for my proposal. For question number 2, 43.8% answered that the speaking was the most difficult skill, but in question number 3, they answered that they would like to improve speaking. For question number 4, a 62.6% answered that they prefer working in small groups or in pairs. And finally, the question number 12, they answered that they like learning English, so they are motivated. Let's look now at the guiding question for my action research proposal. To what extent do scaffolding and group work help reducing anxiety in oral presentations in 11th graders? That brings us to the literature review. This action research proposal is based on 4 main concepts. The first one is foreign language anxiety, that refers to a number of negative feelings that affects students' performance in the foreign language class. To handle these problems, I use first scaffolding, which is the guidance given by a more proficient person to one less proficient. Second, group work, where students work in pairs or small groups to complement each other's knowledge. And the final construct is oral presentation, that it is the outcome of this proposal. It is a form of public speaking where students present about a specific topic. The anxiety triggers that are tackled in this proposal are being afraid of speaking in front of the class, low self-esteem, test-provoking anxiety, lack of knowledge, afraid of making mistakes, fear of negative evaluation, that is not only the fear of being negatively evaluated by the teacher, but also from their own classmates. And the final anxiety trigger is classroom atmosphere. It needs to be a positive classroom climate so that the students feel more comfortable to participate. Let me turn now to the action plan. This action plan is based on Unit 2, Customs and Traditions All Over the World, from Lesson 1, Traditions and Celebrations. I used the textbook Get Real English, Tercero y Cuarto Medio. It is covered in 10 sessions. The grammar focus is present perfect and past simple. The vocabulary focus is adjectives used for describing traditions. The objective of this unit is students will be able to produce a 5 to 7 minute oral presentation in pairs about a chosen tradition using adjectives. The attitudinal objective is repeated throughout all the lessons, and it is students show willingness to exercise actively. And the outcome of this proposal is an oral presentation about a tradition. I'll begin by explaining the lesson sequence. It consists of 10 lessons. Each lesson belongs to one step from the ones followed to prepare an oral presentation. For instance, the two first lessons are about the content and instructions of the final oral presentations. Students work in groups to negotiate meaning, and it is also seen in each lesson the way the teacher scaffolds students' work, either by providing them input, guidelines, instructions, vocabulary, or by modeling the activity. There are two anxiety triggers present during the whole process: being afraid of negative evaluation and classroom atmosphere, which are closely related to each other. So for tackling both of them, I set rules at the beginning of the unit. These are the negative comments among students. Mocking and laughing at others' opinions are forbidden, so students feel more comfortable to participate in classes. Let's revise one of the lessons. For lesson 1, I will provide the students with some input for the development of the next 9 lessons. Students are going to work with vocabulary, grammar, and the description of traditions. Here, the anxiety triggers tackled are low self-esteem and lack of auto-knowledge that are related to each other. As students feel they do not have enough content knowledge, they think that they are not as good as their classmates, which leads to low self-esteem. Scaffolding and group work are explained in the sample material. The objective is students will be able to identify traditions, adjectives, and grammar structures. In lessons 7 and 8, students practice their presentations in small groups and they receive feedback from their groups, so they can enhance their presentations. In these sessions, students scaffold to each other, because scaffolding is not only teacher to students but also among students. As they practice their presentations in small groups, their anxiety of speaking in front of the class is lower. Turning to the sample material, a good example is the listening comprehension from lesson 1. The objective of this material is that students identify main information about traditions and vocabulary related. It is also for students to approach to the description of a tradition, which is the outcome of this unit. During the whole material, students work in groups to negotiate meaning. In the pre-listening activity, students have to look up some words to understand better the video. The provision of some vocabulary is a way of scaffolding. In the while listening, students have to watch a video and complete a chart with the main characteristics of each tradition and then answer some questions. I'm scaffolding this activity by giving them some answers so they know how to do it. In the post-listening activity, the students have to develop a brief description of a tradition, which is an approach to the final task of the unit. I scaffold this activity by giving them some initiators. For collecting data, I will use 3 different instruments: the oral presentation grade, the foreign language anxiety classroom scale, and a semi-structured interview. For the oral presentation grade, I will use a rubric to evaluate the student's performance. This rubric has 7 criteria, from which 2 are the most important for me: body language and delivery, since these criteria can show students' anxiety. The foreign language classroom anxiety scale is a questionnaire in which students have to answer if they feel identified with the sentences and the level of agreement. For instance, I tremble when I know that I'm going to be called on in language class. It is a clear example of anxiety. And finally, the semi-structured interview that consists of 10 questions to clarify the answers from the questionnaire and to know if the proposal reduced their anxiety in the language class or not. Students tend to feel these sensations: rapid heart rate, trembling, tummy ache, rapid breathing, sweating, among others. It is hard to know if students feel those sensations because students don't tell about it to the teacher. So by doing this type of research, we can help these problems and others. The advantages of implementing this action research proposal are that it does not need many resources to be done, the teacher scaffolds the whole process, it provides the necessary contents for the grade, it can be adapted to different contexts, and it promotes a positive classroom environment. Some improvements to do are to modify the duration depending on the context, to adapt it for different number of students, to include more vocabulary depending on the level of English, and to implement more questionnaires for students' progress. Thank you for your attention.